Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Walking Dead World Beyond. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, the crew stops by a... well, it's interesting because as they're walking, because obviously Felix is the one still being like, oh, we're running out of supplies, we should head back. But obviously everyone else is like, no, we need to keep going forward. Even Silas being the most optimistic, being like, no, we'll find a way, it'll be okay. And even Huck being like, why are you smiling? I think for him it's just for the first time. I think after last episode he feels good, probably feels free for the first time in a long time. As he kind of talks about later on, the fact of the matter is, when he was talking to Iris, it's like, you heard what everyone said about me. Like, he's like, I always heard what a lot of people said about me. And she was like, stupid people. It's like, yeah, but most people said. And she's like, exactly, stupid people, you know. But for him it's like, being back there, all he could ever do, no matter where he was, he'd always hear it in his head because everyone said it every day, so it always was stuck in rotation in his head. But now for the first time, he's able to kind of break free. The whole point is like, you know, being out here, you're able to kind of reinvent yourself and stuff like that. He was kind of able to not be bound by the past anymore to a certain extent, you know? So I think for him, that's what that smile was about. But obviously there's also the whole conversation about, you know, the Republic. It's like, the fact, you know, Elton being like, the fact of the matter is, it's understandable why they do what they do. You know, the fact of the matter is that they are very secretive. It's like, he's like, basically from a logical standpoint, it makes sense why they would do that. But also considering, you know, it's like trying to figure out where they, you know, because it's like, for them, it's like wherever our dad is doesn't necessarily mean that that's where the Republic is based out of. And it's also the whole situation of like what they have access to, the agriculture. They must have some form of government. The fact is they have helicopters, meaning that they have a civilization like above ground. It's not like they have underground if they're able to have agriculture. But he also kind of infers like, you know, it's a whole situation of like, you know, meaning, you know, basically kind of tackling the fact is that they had the potential to basically, you know, attack other people, which, you know, ironically, you know, Felix was like, well, they haven't, we've been on good terms with them, but, you know, you have Hope being like, we don't know what they've done either, you know, which, you know, once again, just irony of the situation, that obviously them not knowing what happened back home and everything, you know. So obviously they stop at a high school that so they can get free supplies, and I thought it was kind of obviously the interesting pairings because obviously, you know, because Felix and Huck could talk about the fact is that basically it's like, yeah, they think they're going in the right direction. We're supposed to be going towards Omaha. It's like we're going east, so we're not going the right direction. So it's like they're, you know, but none of them are willing to turn back. But it's like if we can like shift some minds, then maybe we can change some stuff. So like they were even suggesting like starting with Elton, he might be like the cornerstone of this. If we can kind of get him on board, you know, that might kind of sway certain things. So obviously when the time came, like Felix goes with Elton, Hope goes with Huck, mainly because Iris made sure to go with Silas, which, you know, because obviously it's the whole thing about like, oh yeah, avoid zombies and stuff like that. And then Hope took Iris going with Silas as, you know, avoidance, right? Because it's like they haven't had a talk since, you know, everything went down last episode, and she told Iris the truth about everything, you know, related to their mom and the pregnant lady and everything. So, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Obviously, these different pairings lead to different things. Because obviously, it's like the Felix and Elton thing is for one, you know, Felix trying to understand like, oh, you're into all this like sciencey stuff, like, you know, science is kind of your thing. It's like, well, we had that back at the university. He's like, yeah, but obviously, it's like real world application is what he's more concerned about. It's like, yeah, like everything's kind of theory and stuff like that back home, but it's like now here out in the wild, everything's a little more hands-on. It's a lot more practical, you know. So, but for Felix, he's also, for Elton, he's also saying like, yeah, you know, he didn't really know anything about any of the other group. Now he knows, like, you know, it's like he didn't know Hope and Iris, but now, you know, it's like he knows their eating schedule and their bathroom schedule now just because they're, you know, you're around each other so much now. But for him, it's like, I also, you know, he's also on the ride, not just for his own personal reasons, but also because they're worried about their dad. And he's like, I want to be able to help them not worry, you know, because he's been through the situation of having to worry, probably never knowing what, you know, he probably never found, because he doesn't know what happened to his mom. It's like, that's the thing, never knowing. I mean, because Iris could know to a certain extent. I'm sure, like, you know, Hope's, you know, probably told them a certain story about the whole situation. But regardless, it's like, Elton knows what it's like to worry, to not know, and he doesn't want them to worry. So he wants to help them, you know, I guess you can almost look at it as obviously because he couldn't do the same for his mom, he wants to do this for their dad, so I thought that was just kind of an interesting aspect to the whole thing. But obviously, Felix is making a whole point about, I thought it was interesting because Elton was like, when it's all said and done, like, oh, maybe whatever it is, we should, make it, come to us, which, and, I think, showing that obviously, like, engaging isn't something he's really to do, like, against the empties and stuff like that. Which I think what he said was still smart, but I think it was just Felix probably saying, like, it's easy to say that under these circumstances. That's not always a thing, so you always have to be prepared. But obviously, it's like, we learned that obviously he's claustrophobic. We get glimpses at him kind of being locked in somewhere, but it sounds like there might have been empties wherever he was, so I don't know whether that's a thing of, like, someone purposely locked him in there, or maybe it was a situation that, that was, like, during an empty situation, and he needed to be protected, so someone locked him, we still don't know the context of it, but whatever it is, it led to him, like, being, and I think that's so interesting how that stuff is just, like, sprinkled in there. Like, that scene, it pops there for, like, a second and then pops back. It doesn't stay on it. So it's just, like, little sprinkles of everyone's backgrounds. I thought that was kind of interesting. But, like I said, the more so than anything, Felix is telling him, like, you never know what's around that corner. And he's like, none of you guys are ready for what's out here. He's like, hell, I don't even know if I'm ready for what's out here. But for him, it's like, he's got the tattoo. He's like, this is you're wondering why I got this. It's like a reminder. He's like, because I lost my parents too. And he's like, it's a reminder of not just them, but everyone I've ever lost along the way. Like, basically saying, like, how if you're unprepared, like, how this could lead to, you losing people. And it's like, I don't want to lose anybody. So, it's like, all I want is you to think about it. You don't have to decide 100%, but I want you to think about potentially helping side with me and Huck on getting everyone to turn around to make sure everyone stays safe, Just think about it. So on the other side of things, we got Huck and Hope. And Huck's trying to figure out why Hope did the double back. It's like, well, for one, you obviously had second thoughts about these things because you led us here. But then Hope's like, I had second thoughts about my second thoughts, And so obviously Hope is pretty, from up front, is able to kind of tell that what Huck's trying to do. But at the same time, throughout that side of things, like, obviously, like, the conversations about dads kind of come up. We get a little bit about Huck because, it's like, your dad had to be proud of you, right? Because you're in the military and everything. And she was like, yeah, he was. Huck's like, but that's the thing about dads. It's a complicated thing. Like, they basically don't always go about the right way showing how proud of you they are. Like, they don't always go about it, like, the easiest way or something like that, which I'm like, what's that? So, whatever it is, it's like her relationship with her dad was complicated in some regard. Even though it seemed like he might have been proud, there might have still been some stipulations and complications to it, the way Huck was talking about it. But on, like, Hope's side of things, obviously she's thinking about her dad with everything. Obviously it's like I forgot what it was exactly, but he missed out on something, which he even talked about. He was like, I think it's also like the way his mind works, because he was like, oh yeah, like I remembered, but then like I figured something out that I was kind of stuck on, and then he was like, but then I remembered you did the whole stink bomb thing, and so like I kind of forgot again, but then in this very moment I remembered again. So it seemed like, because it's kind of that, maybe he's on that level of kind of like, oh, he has such like so much on his mind because of maybe the way his mind works, because it seems like him and his kids are super smart, so it's like maybe it's just a situation of like, well, I mean, which obviously they're not directly related, because obviously Hope's kind of smart in her own right as well, but maybe it's just because like, well, when you have a smart parent that kind of like, it trained you, probably like, they probably raised you in a way to kind of like, what your dad knows probably rubbed off on you to a certain extent. Obviously, like, Hope kind of remixes things, because it's like, oh, the whole stink bomb thing, it's like, oh, it's timed and stuff, and he brought up like, oh, you used this, and she's like, actually I used this. He was like, actually pretty good, so it's like she kind of probably takes things and kind of remixes them and kind of goes about things in a different perspective, because Iris might be a beat for her dad, and Hope might be more of a remix of her dad to a certain extent, At least that's what I'm getting, because, Hope feels like, oh, you probably wish you had another Iris. When she talks about the fact is, he's like, I wish you could see how extraordinary you are. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. And I think because of what Hope went through, like, she probably feels like she's never good enough, because she's always like, yeah, probably like Iris is the better sister. She's smarter. She's the one that gets in the least amount of trouble. It's almost like she's the daughter you wish you had a second one of. But for him, the way he talks talks about it, it's like, obviously, it's like when me and your mom found you guys, it seemed like Iris and Hope were already kind of a thing, almost like you're already attached to the hip, and it's like we would never want to separate that and destroy that relationship. You are spectacular in your own way. Like I said, he just wishes she would see herself the way he does, but like I said, I think everything with their mom, maybe it's something with her upbringing that led to her kind of already having that. Maybe the mom situation, keeping that to herself, maybe that just kind of agitated something that was already there, like that kind of like might not having self-confidence, maybe feeling like she's not good because she's maybe that's why she's kind of the quote-unquote troublemaker that she is because there's something there where she just feels like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough, so why try? Maybe that's why she kind of potentially acts out a little bit. It's because she wants to be seen a certain way, but she's afraid no one will ever see her a certain way. Maybe that's me just reading too much into it, but I just thought that was interesting, but obviously it's like later on when he's leaving, because she's like, you don't know these people, but he's like, I trust my brain, and my brain is telling me to trust these people, which I'm like, I know, because I could say it seems like their dad is quirky in the sense that, like I said, I think it's like, once again, that thing of like, when you're super intelligent, it seems like you might have some quirks, like other aspects of who you are, you're on the more social side of things, maybe you're not as like intelligent in that regard. Obviously, when it comes to smarts and stuff, you are, but when it's like on a more personal human level, maybe you kind of start lacking a little. Maybe not. Like I said, that's just me kind of potential projecting stuff. But she's even saying like, I'm sorry, I'm a screw up. And he was like, you are not a screw up, and in no shape or form, you being you is no shape or form the reason why I'm doing it. I mean, it's like, it's because obviously he cares about her is one of the reasons why he's doing it. He doesn't really get into it, but he talks about something I thought was kind of fascinating, where it's a situation where he's like, you're frustrated. He's like, I get it. He's like, it's something we need to talk about. There's something to it. Like, when I get back, we'll talk. And I'm like, I'm curious about that. Like, because even Hope later on wonders, like, she's like, maybe I didn't take my dad's stuff for what it really was. Maybe there's more to it. Part of me wonders, what was he getting at? Does he actually know more about the situation that went down when Hope was little, like with their mom and everything? Like, does he know more about that than he's letting on, or is it supposed to be connected to like Hope's birth parents? Like, does he? Because he almost makes it sound like her being frustrated is actually like a byproduct, almost like maybe it's like it's like, oh, it's something you got from your birth parents. Like, I don't know whether that was something he was getting at, or whether it was more so about, I'm curious, like, what that whole thing was about, because even now she's curious, like, what he was trying to tell me before he left, because she thought she kind of had it figured out about, like, because she thought it was like, oh, at the time I thought he was just telling me to tell me that, trying to make me feel better, but it's like, no, maybe he actually knew something that I don't know, so she wants to find out, like, what the hell he was talking about then, There's also, like, the whole thing about the dog, which I thought was interesting, because, like, when Huck was going for her gun, she was like, no, not the gun. So I think that's an interesting thing, because I think that means going forward, like, when the time comes, Hope's not going to be able to pull the trigger because of her trauma. Understandably so. I mean, everyone, like I said, it seems like everyone's kind of got their trauma, their triggers. Obviously, we know Felix's situation comes from, like, a complicated thing with his family. Huck, we haven't really tackled too much, which I think is interesting, because, like, so far, she's the only one. I mean, it could always pop up in future episodes. She's the only one we haven't gotten any flashbacks with. She's talked about stuff, but we haven't seen any flashbacks with her. We have with literally everybody else. So that's what I think is so fascinating. I'm curious to see what they end up doing with that. Like, it'll probably turn around soon enough to be like that, but I'm just curious. But I think that's going to lead to something where it's like Hope can't pull the trigger because she's going to be super reluctant to use guns when the time comes, just because of what went down. So it's like, don't use a gun. It's like, oh, for one, it's like, you don't want to attract any sound, but it's also just because, like, I think if the gun was used around her, it probably, it triggers something in her again, and it probably just bring, especially because, now that she's told Iris everything, like, it probably, like, resonates even more in the forefront of her mind now, just because now she's thinking about, like, now that I've told Iris will never look at me the same way. Like, that's why she was afraid to tell Iris in the first place. So it's like her fears are kind of coming true in a certain regard. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But even Huck, because like Huck was saying, that's right, because I was trying, like, Huck was talking about misreading situations. It's like, you kind of pick that up where you kind of read a situation, but then she talks about the fact that you kind of, there's a lot of times where you will read a situation a certain way and then realize, like, oh, things aren't what you thought they were. Hence why Hope looked at the whole conversation with her dad a little different. Like, oh, maybe there was more to it than I thought it was. At the same time, there's the whole situation with Silas and Iris, and they having this cute moment together. You know, it's like, which is so sad, because obviously an interesting aspect to it is because they're in this high school. Like, obviously, you look at the yearbook and everything, and it's just, you know, the whole conversation where Iris is like, do you think they realize how good they had it? You know, because obviously, like, there's paintbrushes and stuff like that. She's like, yeah, this isn't really necessary. But Silas like, yeah, but who's to say what's really necessary, you know? And so he gives her like the paint and the paintbrushes, you know, because she's an artist and everything. And obviously he had let her listen to his music. It's like, it was like his grandma's favorite song. So, but I thought it was interesting. It's like, do you think they knew how good they have it? I mean, that's the thing. You don't know how good you have it until it's gone. Like, I don't think that's anyone's regard. Like, you never know how good something is until it's gone. You never appreciate it as much until it's gone, sadly. So you kind of have to, that's why the whole thing is that you have to appreciate every day, like, treat every day. I'm sure some people will agree or disagree about the whole treat every day like it's your last, because you never know what's on the other side of things. And obviously that being the whole point with Felix being like, there's nothing around the corner now, but who's to say there won't be eventually, you know? So, but even Silas was like, but didn't you have all this back at the university? And she's like, yeah, I did. But for her, it was a thing of, if I knew then what I know now. Because I think she talks about the fact is, once again, it's like she put so many other people first. It's, you know, it's just kind of like, maybe if she knew back then, maybe things would be handled a little differently. As Iris is like, what? She's just like stuff, you know? It's like, obviously it's like she's not ready to talk about her, you know, because it's like, obviously it's stuff that her sister's still dealing with. It's stuff that she's still processing that her sister is dealing with, that I think she's not ready to kind of tell everyone about. I mean, everyone still has their secrets amongst the group. But them listening to the music and then, like, you know, them dancing, you know, them kind of messing up a little bit, but then I thought it was kind of neat. And I thought, once again, I liked that being an aesthetic of, like, how they captured, like, the aesthetic, kind of like almost like that hand, like, it's, I don't know what you'd call that effect where it almost looks like they took everything and then they kind of drew on top of it to kind of give it like a you know, a drawing aesthetic. Because I kept thinking back in my mind, I'm like, oh, that aesthetic isn't there as much as I thought it would be. And it is, I guess, to certain aesthetics and certain elements. So it's probably going to be something sprinkled in. It's not something that's going to be a main aesthetic for the show. But it was just interesting, like, obviously when we got the flashbacks, or like, you know, obviously when you're looking at the high school and everything. And I think that's just the sad aspect of the whole thing, is just like, yeah, like, how this world is of you just kind of like, because one of the empties you see dead at the end of the episode is one with the purple hair, which we saw different like photos of her like from the yearbook and stuff like that, and it's just kind of like who these people were, and it's just kind of like how quickly things can change. Because part of you wonders, like, you know, oh, you got a little stamp into their life by looking at this book, but then you're like, where are they now? And you see like, oh, that's where their story ended, you know? So it puts things in an interesting, very sad perspective. But obviously everyone trying to like find their way to each other. At one point in time, you know, Iris and Silas are I guess corner. I thought it was interesting because like we never really found out too much about, I guess it's the dogs, like maybe the dogs are doing it on purpose, but we see that there's at least one, but maybe it is a mother protecting its children, but it does seem like it takes out the empties, and it seemed like it was stockpiling them almost like nests. I don't know whether it's like the dogs are eating that as substance or what. Also they did, you know, ultimately end up finding supplies and stuff too, but in the moment of like, obviously like to protect Iris, like Silas ended up killing one, and he was just like, they keep coming, and he said that line, and then he stabbed one, and then another one he like attacked it, threw down his weapon and started punching the other. It's hardcore in the face. Elton tried to stop him but got pushed back, and Felix ended up killing the others and ended up stopping Silas, and in that moment he's covered in blood. He's like, I'm sorry. And it's like, oh, he lost control, because we saw little flashes where it seemed like someone was choking him. So the question is, so what he did, was it out of self-defense? Was that choking something that happened after the fact? Was that someone trying to stop him? Because obviously at the time he was thinking about he was like, oh, what he did, even his own mom testified against him. So, because of everything, Silas felt like, oh, I need to be left behind, which Iris is like, no, we're not leaving you behind. Like, you've protected us twice, And the fact of the matter is, because he's like, you had to have heard what my other people say. He's like, do you know that I killed my dad? Like, do you believe that? And it's like, if you do, it's okay. And she's like, it doesn't matter what, anyone says. Like, the fact is, you were there for us, you protected us, so I get, for her, it's like, that's all that matters. And I think, I'm curious to find out what Silas's deal is. Is it like he had, because obviously, once again, I figured that's why he didn't want to kill, because he was afraid that, like, if he got aggressive with the MTC, felt like he'd lose himself again. So maybe it's like deep-seated anger issues. Now, part of me is wondering, was his dad abusive or something? And is that what happened? Like, it could have been a situation where, like, it could have been an abusive relationship where maybe he hurt his dad. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he killed him. Maybe he didn't. But maybe, like, it was an abusive situation and his mom stuck up for his dad instead of him. Maybe not. Like I said, we still don't know. Like, it had to be. It's after the fact. So, like, that's why I'm thinking it's so interesting that there's this whole aspect of, like, obviously, like, his hands being covered in blood, him getting arrested and stuff. That there's still so much to that story we don't know. And like I said, that kind of applies to everybody. But also, like, Iris and Hope had their moment too. And, Iris is talking about the fact of the matter is, if they had talked about everything, maybe things would be different. Like, they missed out on it, because it's like, we wouldn't have had to go through all of our thing. Like, she wouldn't have had to go through her own stuff on her own, and neither would Hope. Like, they could have been there for each other, and we missed out on that. Like, but it's kind of like, regardless of everything, we have each other now. It's kind of out there in the open, so let's be open with each other and kind of like bridge that gap between us again, like figure this out together, be there for each other, And then there's also, the Elton situation where he realizes, like, no, it's not Cyrus's fault. It's okay, but obviously what Felix had said before, it shifted his mind. It's like, if you do have an idea, what would it be? And it's like, well, there's the whole Mississippi situation. So it's like, we're going to need your help kind of convincing the others. Like, if we can convince them, they're going to turn back too. So now it's kind of 3 versus 3, because Huck, Felix and Elton are now on the side. Well, not with Elton, it's 3 on their side of wanting to go back. Now you have Hope, Iris, and Silas wanting to not. So the group is now split a little 50-50. Because of what Felix said, I think it even ties into the end of the episode where Elton is taking a picture, and Hope was even like, you normally don't take pictures of like people, it's usually just things and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, I know, but it's like he wanted to capture this moment because it's like this right here, this group of friends, it means something to him, and it's like, once again, like, Felix has a tattoo to remind him of the people he lost, and I think. For Felix, I keep doing that. For Elton, it is a situation of he wants to capture this moment to remember, like, this is just as important as anything else he discovers. Is like, because also you can make the argument, like, what he discovered is right here in front of him, so that, maybe that in itself speaks volumes of like, yeah, I'm so captured by all this other discovery stuff that I can't lose sight of what's in front of me, because it's a reminder of what he lost. He has a picture of his mom and everything, and what he's doing is kind of continuing his mom's, book and stuff like that. So it's like, that I think sometimes he might forget the other side of like that human element, that maybe that moment was to capture that and remember, like, these are people who are important to him now too, so once again, kind of something he's discovered as well throughout this. So I thought that was just kind of a nice ending to the episode. So I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Obviously, diving more into everyone else's past. Obviously, once again, they're still oblivious to everything that went back at the university. Obviously, we got peeks into that last episode with the Republic, in particular with Elizabeth, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all that ends up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.